There's a peculiar sound that seems to echo everywhere now, in TikToks, Reels, and glossy travel vlogs. It's the soft, rhythmic clatter of wheeled suitcases rolling across polished airport floors, a kind of modern heartbeat pulsing beneath the soundtrack of our digital lives. Everywhere you look, Gen Z is somewhere else. They're on trains winding through the Italian countryside, on ferries drifting towards the Greek islands, in capsule hotels in Tokyo, or tucked away in minimalist Airbnbs in Lisbon. They film sunrise hikes in Bali and rooftop dinners in Istanbul. They curate perfectly framed cafe shots in Paris while writing captions about finding themselves. And beneath all of these images is a phrase that keeps resurfacing online. Gen Z doesn't dream of labor, they dream of leaving. The more you scroll, the more you start to believe it. Airports have become the new town square. A boarding pass is practically an accessory, a subtle social signal, and the refrains we hear, "I'm only here for 3 days. I just needed to get away," sounds less like casual travel updates and more like tiny confessions. Because the truth is, we are traveling more than ever, but why? Why the sudden urge to be everywhere at once? And why now, in a world that feels increasingly unstable, economically, politically, and emotionally? We tend to think of travel as leisure, freedom, and curiosity. But what if it's also a coping mechanism? What if this travel surge has less to do with adventure and more to do with hopelessness? What if the constant movement isn't just a hobby, but a symptom of something deeper? A collective relentlessness, a quiet desperation, a longing for a life that feels out of reach at home. In today's video essay, we're unpacking the cultural forces shaping this global movement. We'll explore how the internet turned escape into an aesthetic, why past generations traveled so differently, and how pop culture, from Eat, Pray, Love to the TikTok era hot girl walk abroad, fueled the fantasy of reinvention abroad. And we'll look at how this wanderlust echoes an entire century of economic anxiety, feminine escapism, and aesthetic longing. By the end, we might discover that Gen Z isn't traveling to see the world. They're traveling to find a version of themselves that still feels possible. So let's begin. And hello everyone, my name is Laura and welcome back to my channel. Chapter 1. The Internet Made Escape an Aesthetic. The modern travel boom didn't begin in airports or passport offices. It began on our screens, long before Gen Z was boarding cheap flights to Europe or filming themselves wandering through the streets of Tokyo. They were scrolling. The desire to leave was planted in the digital soil of apps that made escape look not only possible, but beautiful. Before social media, travel was something people did, not something they curated. You took photos to remember moments, not to prove them. Vacation pictures lived inside film envelopes or family albums, not on a public feed with filters and hashtags. The journey existed primarily in memory, private, imperfect, and unmonetized. But around 2012, the era of aspirational escapism began. Instagram's rise changed everything. Suddenly, travel became visual poetry, pastel sunsets, perfectly foamy cappuccinos in foreign cafes. Legs stretched out towards an airplane window with clouds drifting below. The world didn't just open up geographically, it opened up aesthetically. Pinterest followed, acting as a mood board for the lives we didn't yet have. We pin images of Italian alleyways and French balconies not because we've been there, but because we've wanted to become that type of person who could go there. Travel transformed from movement into mood, a soft, warm, curated dream. For young women in particular, travel videos became a new language of desire. It wasn't simply look at this place, it was look at the life I could have if I went there. The content boom produced entire micro-genres of escapist fantasy. Girlhood in Paris, videos with gingham dresses and baguettes tucked under their arms, solo travel diaries filmed like indie movies, 24 hours in Tokyo vlogs with neon-lit street signs and convenience store halls, the digital nomad fantasy of working from a laptop in a beach cafe, the now iconic European summer aesthetic with gold jewelry glinting against tanned shoulders. And these weren't just trips, they were identities. And the algorithm rewarded them. Wanderlust wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a brand, a lifestyle aspiration the internet constantly nudged us towards, whether through influencers documenting their month-long trip to Bali or TikTok edits of girls wandering through Lisbon at golden hour. The digital world created a constant hum of possibility. whispering that somewhere out there was a better, more beautiful version of your life, if you only bought the ticket. What's more interesting is how closely this mirrors history. Travel as performance isn't new. It existed long before smartphones. In the 18th century, European aristocrats embarked on the Grand Tour, a tradition where wealthy young men traveled through Italy and France to cultivate refinement and worldliness. These trips were as much about appearance as education. The journals, letters, and paintings they brought back function exactly like Instagram posts today. Visual proof of sophistication, cultural capital, and self-fashioning. Travel was a stage, and the traveler was the protagonist. The difference now is that the Grand Tour has been democratized. You no longer need aristocratic lineage to collect passport stamps. A cheap flight, a hostel bed, and an iPhone do the job. The internet took the exclusivity of old world travel, stripped away the gatekeeping, and added an aesthetic glow that makes everything look attainable, even if the reality behind it is much messier. And with the aestheticization of travel came a new psychological effect. Today's young women don't just want to visit new places, they want to embody a cinematic version of themselves within them. Travel content tells them that somewhere out there is a more romantic, more interesting, more confident version of themselves waiting to be discovered. A Parisian iteration who reads poetry in cafes, a Tokyo version who experiments with fashion, a coastal Italy persona who becomes softer, slower, and more sensual. The destination isn't just a place, it's a mirror reflecting back at a fantasy self. The more chaotic the world becomes, the more seductive the fantasy grows. Global instability, economic anxiety, political tension, climate dread creates a psychological vacuum where escape becomes more than a desire. It becomes a coping mechanism. When the future feels uncertain, the present becomes a place to hide. And nothing offers a more immediate aestheticized escape than scrolling through videos of someone else's perfect getaway. But the real secret is this. The internet didn't just make travel look beautiful, it made leaving look like a solution, a cure for burnout, a fix for the heartbreak, a path to reinvention. The subtext of travel content is always transformation. I went away and came back different. I left to find myself. It's a narrative deeply rooted in centuries of feminine longing. Stories where women would escape to faraway places to break free from societal expectations, only to return stronger, wiser, and more self-possessed. And now Gen Z is acting that same story in real time. Except the plot unfolds on TikTok instead of in novels. When reality feels unbearable, fantasy becomes survival. And in the digital age, fantasy is just a plane ticket, a camera angle away. Chapter 2, Escaping Economic Hopelessness. On paper, the Gen Z travel surge makes almost no sense. This is a generation facing some of the worst economic conditions in modern history. Soaring rent prices, stagnant wages, student debt, housing markets that feel like fever dreams, and a job landscape where entry level somehow requires 5 years of experience. Yet paradoxically, they're also the generation most likely to be seen sipping iced lattes in Portugal or taking mere selfies in the bathroom of a Tokyo cafe. The contradiction is striking. How can a generation with so little financial stability be the most in motion? The answer is hidden inside the contradiction itself. Travel isn't happening despite hopelessness, it's happening because of it. And historically, travel booms have always emerged in eras of immense social anxiety. When societies feel uncertain, people move. In the 1920s, after the devastation of World War I, Europe and America experienced a surge in leisure travel. Cruise ships, seaside resorts, cross-country train journeys. People sought glamour and distraction from the trauma they carried. The message was clear: if the world is unstable, find beauty wherever you can. In the 1970s, during an era marked by recession, oil crisis, and political disillusionment, another wave emerged, the era of backpacking. Young people traveled across Europe and Asia armed with nothing but loose change, well-worn copies of travel guides, and idealism. The hippie trail from Istanbul to Kathmandu became a rite of passage. These journeys were part rebellion, part escape, and part existential search, a longing for meaning beyond the suffocating pressures of home. Today's Gen Z travel boom fits perfectly into the historical pattern. When your future feels uncertain, you create meaning by leaving the life that doesn't feel like yours. When the economy feels fixable, you find solace in places not defined by the metrics you can't meet. When home doesn't offer stability, you pack a bag and look for it somewhere else. Travel in this context becomes a pressure valve, a release of the tension created by structural limitations. It's the rare space where the math of adulthood breaks down. You might never afford a home, but you can afford a plane ticket. You might never have a traditional career arc, but you can collect passport stamps. You might not build generation wealth, but you can build memories that make the struggle feel survivable. This shift marks a profound change in generational psychology. For decades, the ideal path was linear. Work hard now, enjoy life later. Save now, travel in retirement. Delay gratification, build, plan. But Gen Z doesn't believe in later, not because they're entitled or impulsive, but because they've grown up watching later collapse for so many people. They are the children of the Great Recession. They came of age during a pandemic. They're navigating climate anxiety, economic fragility, and constant digital comparison. Why wait for a retirement that may not exist? Why save for a house that feels permanently out of reach? Why sacrifice your 20s for a reward that previous generations promised but never guaranteed? In a world where long-term plans feel almost hypothetical, Gen Z has shifted into an intensely present tense way of living. They travel now because later feels like a story someone else gets to have. And in many ways, travel has become the modern form of escapism that feels socially acceptable, even admirable. Unlike other coping mechanisms, travel is framed as an investment in oneself, a way to gain perspective, to collect experiences, to cultivate a life that feels meaningful. It's a kind of soft rebellion against the impossible expectations of productivity culture. If the system won't reward you, you create your own rewards. For women especially, travel becomes even more layered, something deeper, almost political. Historically, women's movements had always been restricted. Their bodies were tied to homes, families, and husbands, small towns. The ability to travel alone was often a privilege, sometimes even a scandal. Today, when a Gen Z woman books a solo flight to Seoul or Lisbon or Mexico City, it carries a quiet defiance. A declaration of agency, a way of saying, if I can't control anything else, at least I can control where my body exists today. It's both emotional and pragmatic. Travel allows women to imagine versions of themselves that don't feel possible in their current circumstances. In a society that often treats femininity as something to regulate or scrutinize, travel offers a temporary suspension of those pressures. You become an observer, not the observed, a person in motion, not a person anchored by expectation. And yet, beneath this freedom is a subtle ache, a quiet sadness that underpins the wanderlust. The sadness of knowing that movement is easier to achieve than stability, that it's often more possible to book a flight across the world than to secure affordable housing in your own city, that you can reinvent yourself for a week in Paris more easily than you can secure long-term financial security in your 20s. But alongside that sadness is a quiet power, a recognition that even in the midst of economic chaos, there is still room for joy, exploration, and self-discovery, that meaning can be found in experiences and not just achievements, that you can claim beauty even when the world tells you you haven't earned it. Gen Z isn't just running away because they're lost. They're running because the world told them that staying still wouldn't save them anyway. And in that motion, they're finding something resembling hope. Chapter 3, Pop Culture and the Female Fantasy of Reinvention. Travel isn't just tourism, it's storytelling. And no medium has shaped the way women imagine the story more deeply than film. For decades, Hollywood has sold us the idea that transformation is something that happens elsewhere, in sun-drenched landscapes and charming foreign streets, where the version of ourselves we've been too afraid to become is suddenly possible. You see it in Eat, Pray, Love, where Julia Roberts' character escapes the shell of her life to heal in Italy, India, and Bali. A cinematic pilgrimage that has practically become a blueprint for women seeking rebirth. You see it in Mamma Mia, where Amanda Seyfried's character discovers her identity on a Greek island, overflowing with turquoise water and possibility. You see it in Sex and the City, where Paris becomes a gilded cage that both liberates and disorients Carrie Bradshaw. And you see it in Before Sunrise, where Celine and Jesse fall in love simply by wandering through Vienna, suggesting that romance is something you find in transit, not at home. These stories aren't just entertainment, they seep into a cultural subconscious, shaping how we think, reinvention works, the implication is subtle but powerful. Travel isn't about the destination, it's about becoming a different woman, a softer woman, a freer woman, a woman who sheds her past like old skin the moment her passport is stamped. This fantasy has historical roots. In the Victorian era, wealthy women were often prescribed the rest cure, a medicalized escape where they were sent to spas, sanatoriums, or coastal towns under the guise of treating hysteria. In reality, they were suffocating under social expectations that gave them no room to breathe. Travel was framed as medicine for emotional burdens, heartbreak, exhaustion, and disappointment, the quiet misery of living a life you didn't choose. A change of scenery was believed to restore sanity. Freedom of movement, however temporary, was healing. Today, the same psychological script plays out on TikTok. The rest cure has become the heartbreak flight to Paris, the I quit my job to moved abroad vlog, the healing journey filmed on cobblestone streets. Millions of women document their transformation in foreign cities, narrating the rebirths with cinematic transitions and soft music. I came to Lisbon alone after a breakup. One video might begin. Another, I booked a flight to Korea to feel something again. It's not that these trips are superficial, it's that the internet has given women a language and an audience for their reinvention. Travel becomes a rebirth ritual, a shedding of identity, a soft reset, the modern equivalent of a spiritual pilgrimage. Instead of temples or shrines, the sacred spaces is the foreign city, the place where no one knows your history, where you can exist unobserved, unburdened, where your past can't follow you like a shadow. It's no coincidence that so much of this content is created by women. For centuries, women's identities have been defined by others, family, partners, and society. Travel offers the rare chance to define yourself solely on your own terms. The desire to reinvent oneself abroad runs deeper than aesthetics. It speaks to a fundamental yearning for anonymity, a chance to be someone without the weight of who you've been. There's something intoxicating about stepping into a city where no one recognizes you, where you can walk through crowded streets and feel both invisible and infinite. In that liminal space between arrival and departure, women allow themselves to imagine new futures. They dress differently, they speak differently, they walk differently, they make choices they wouldn't dare make at home. Pop culture reinforces this in every turn. Think of Under the Tuscan Sun, where Diane Lane's character restores both a crumbling villa and her fractured sense of self. Or The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, where Greece becomes a place of emotional awakening for Lena. Or Lost in Translation, where Tokyo becomes a surreal mirror for two lonely souls searching for connection. These films tell women that foreign cities hold secrets about themselves they cannot uncover in their everyday lives. And now in the digital age, these narratives have been compressed into 15-second TikToks. Castles in Ireland, sunsets in Mexico's, winter streets in Seoul. Each clip promises something subtly addictive. The possibility that your real life, the one you long for, exists just one plane ride away. But beneath the romance is something more haunting. The fantasy of reinvention abroad is seductive partly because home often feels like a place of stagnation, a place where routines harden into identity, where other people's memories of you shape your choices. Travel offers a temporary escape from that heaviness. It gives women permission to change without justification. In many ways, it's the closest thing modern life has to a rite of passage. Not an institutional ceremony, but a self-chosen metamorphosis, a journey into a version of yourself that feels braver, fuller, and more alive. Travel becomes a space where women rewrite their stories, not because the city changes them, but because the distance finally allows them to. Chapter 4. Travel as an aesthetic labor. Travel looks effortless online, glowing skin in golden hour light, breezy dresses swaying on coastal cliffs, curated cafes with pastel lattes and delicate pastries. It all appears spontaneous, dreamy, and blissfully unbothered. But behind the scenes, it's work. Women don't just travel anymore, they content travel. Every step of the journey becomes an opportunity or a responsibility to create something beautiful. A moment isn't just experienced, it's evaluated for its cinematic potential. A simple walk through a market turns into a film montage. A cappuccino becomes a close-up shot. A sunset becomes a time-lapse, and the traveler becomes, whether she admits it or not, both the creator and the product. This is not a new expectation placed on women. It's simply a new format for an old form of aesthetic labor. Throughout history, femininity has always demanded invisible work, especially during moments that were supposed to be leisurely. In the 19th century, women kept elaborate travel scrapbooks, filling them with neatly arranged postcards, watercolor sketches, and pressed flowers gathered during their trips. These weren't just keepsakes, they were social artifacts meant to demonstrate refinement, sensitivity, and cultural engagement. In the 1950s, families posed for vacation photos on beaches, but the pressure fell disproportionately on women, matching swimsuits, perfected hairsets, and poised smiles even under harsh sun. These images lived inside carefully curated albums, another form of visual storytelling women were expected to maintain. Fast forward to the early 2000s, and the rise of the digital SLR cameras and travel blogs ushered in a new era of documentation. Suddenly, women were writing long-form essays on WordPress, editing photos with early filters, and sharing in itineraries as a form of lifestyle identity. Now, in the age of TikTok and Instagram Reels, the tools have become more polished, the expectations higher, and the algorithms hungrier. The performance hasn't changed, only the platform. And the labor has become more demanding, because on today's internet, beauty isn't just admired, it's monetized, incentivized, and rewarded. If the video gets enough views, the trip pays for itself. The photos go viral. You build a following. This possibility turns vacations into unpaid creative projects, where every moment carries the potential for engagement. This creates a strange paradox. Gen Z travels to escape pressure, but documenting that escape introduces a new pressure of its own. The trip becomes both the escape and the content produced about the escape. The line between memory and performance blurs until the two are indistinguishable. You ask yourself, did I really enjoy that moment, or did I just film it? Was I moved by that cathedral in front of me, or was I capturing the perfect reaction for the camera? Were the tears real, or did I cry harder because the lighting was good? Experience becomes intertwined with its aesthetic potential. Even the logistics of the trip are shaped by aesthetic labor. Women set their phones on staircases for self-timed shots, smoothing their hair in reflective windows and scanning for locations that will look clean on camera. They switch outfits mid-day to match the different backgrounds. They rehearse walking naturally across a bridge for the 5th take. They wake up early to catch good light and stay up late editing the footage they just captured. This constant awareness of being seen, even when technically alone, puts women in a perpetual state of self-performance. Yet beneath this critique lies something more tender. There's an undertone of resilience in this labor, a way women use beauty and aesthetic to create meaning in unstable times. Historically, women have always found ways to soften the edges of difficult realities through ritual, adornment, and creativity. Victorian women embroidering linens during times of emotional confinement, wartime women painting their lips red as a defiant declaration of normalcy, mid-century housewives arranging flowers and setting beautiful tables even when their personal identities felt constrained. Beauty has often been a lifeline, a small rebellion, a refusal to let darkness swallow everything. Perhaps aesthetic travel isn't just vanity. Perhaps it's a way of insisting that life can still feel magical, even when the world feels heavy. A way of noticing beauty on purpose. A way of saying, I am here and I am capable of seeing wonder. When a woman films herself walking through a foreign street at sunset, maybe she's not performing emptiness. Maybe she's reclaiming light. Maybe she's documenting proof that she can still feel joy, softness, and awe. In that sense, aesthetic labor becomes a quiet form of survival, a ritual of attentiveness, a soft rebellion against culture that constantly tells young women their future is bleak. Through the act of filming, editing, and curating beauty, they carve out small spaces of meaning. They build archives of moments that help them keep going. And even if the travel content is curated, even if it's filtered, even if it's meticulously staged, there's still something undeniably powerful in choosing to see the world through a lens of beauty, especially when life back home feels overwhelming. In a way, aesthetic travel is a reminder that even now, even in uncertainty, women can still shape their own stories. And in itself, it's a kind of magic. Chapter 5, the feminine desire for elsewhere. There's something uniquely feminine about longing, about the ache for elsewhere, for a life just out of reach, shimmering on the horizon like a mirage. It's a feeling that has lived inside women for centuries, nurtured in bedrooms, kitchens, and drawing rooms, and households in small towns where their movements are restricted, their choices predetermined, and their futures mapped by everyone but themselves. Because of this confinement, the idea of a way became more than geography. It became symbolic, a place where selfhood could finally expand, a place where a woman could be something other than what society demanded of her. Elsewhere became the dream. We see this longing threaded throughout literature, where female characters imagine freedom through distance. Anna Karenina dreams of Italy's sunlight, art, and sensuality far removed from the cold constraints of Russian society. Jo March aches for New York, a city where she can write, create, and escape the roles expected of women of Concord. Elizabeth Bennet's trip to the lakes becomes a rare portal out of provincial life, a glimpse into a world larger, richer, and more textured than the one she knows. And the Bronte sisters, who rarely traveled far beyond their rural parsonage, wrote windswept moors and Gothic estates into their novels with such intensity that you can feel their yearning spilling through their pages. Their landscapes are emotional geographies, wild, untamed, and full of possibilities that their real lives couldn't contain. Women have always traveled first in their minds when they couldn't travel in their bodies. The pages of novels were their ships and carriages. Their imaginations were their passports. Distance was a metaphor for a freedom long before it was an actual experience. But today, finally, the door is open. Cheap flights, remote work, visa programs, and social media inspiration have given modern women access to the physical movement their ancestors could only dream about. Gen Z women are stepping into centuries of longing made real, fulfilling desires that once belonged purely to fiction. When they book a spontaneous flight to Portugal or spend a month working from Seoul, they aren't just indulging in wanderlust, they are participating in a quiet generational rewriting of what women are allowed to do with their lives. Travel becomes a protest against limitation. It becomes a reclamation of mobility, something historically denied to women. But most importantly, it becomes a way to write their own narrative, often for the first time. A woman traveling alone isn't just physically moving, she is shifting psychologically, socially, and symbolically. She is placing herself in a context where she is both the observer and the protagonist, where her identity is shaped not by expectation but by curiosity. And that's the transformative power of elsewhere. When women travel, they aren't simply visiting new places, they're stepping into new versions of themselves. Versions that are braver, more open, and more spontaneous. Versions who walk differently, dress differently, speak differently, who make choices based on desire rather than obligation, who see themselves reflected in foreign mirrors with new clarity. There's a scene that plays out again and again on TikTok vlogs. A girl pulls open the curtains of a hotel room to reveal a glowing city she's never seen before. In that moment, the rush of possibility, the thrill of being anonymous, the first breath of new self, there's something almost sacred. It's the purest expression of feminine longing finally being met by the world. The elsewhere she dreamed of is no longer imaginary. It's right outside her window. This desire isn't about escapism in the shallow sense. It's about self-expansion. It's about finally having the space to grow into a woman whose identity isn't suffocated by familiarity. When you walk alone through a foreign street, passing strangers who don't know your history, something inside you loosens. You're no longer defined by your past, you're defined by your possibilities. Every cafe, every train window, every sunlit corner becomes a canvas in which you can project a new version of yourself. When women throughout history were told their worlds were small, today Gen Z women are proving that their worlds can be as large as they dare to make them. They are claiming cities, coastlines, mountains, and skylines with the same fervor that past heroines claimed fictional landscapes. They are living out the fantasies the literature planted in them generations ago. And in stepping into these new places, they're stepping into women their ancestors would barely recognize, yet would undoubtedly be proud of. The longing that once lived in daydreams now takes the shape of plane tickets, visas, and curated itineraries. The ache for elsewhere has become a life in motion, because when a woman leaves home, she isn't just seeing the world, she's discovering the parts of herself that only distance can reveal. And let me know in the comments below, did you find yourself traveling more so when you were younger, in your 20s? Are you a Gen Z and you feel like you're like, well, what's the point of saving for a house if everything's so out of reach? So I'm just gonna travel. I mean, I feel like I traveled a lot more in my 20s. Sometimes I wish I kind of thought about tomorrow more and like saved more, but then I guess I did have all those experiences, which I didn't do so much later in life because I was trying to be more mature. So I mean, you can't win either way. I mean, I guess if you have the means to do so, I feel like even travel now is still expensive because the cost of living is so expensive. So unless you like were able to like live with your parents or like had cheap accommodation to like save the money to travel, but I do like the idea, the romantic idea of leaving and starting over, and so I get that, but I think a lot of it has to do with movies and pop culture. So anyways, thanks for watching and let me know in the comments below.